saying what we said.
So yeah, today we are talking about modern times Chaplin film, uh, and it's just me and Josh today. But Josh, how is the experience? What's your level of like how many silent films have you watched? How familiar are you with silent films, and kind of how was the experience of watching this one?
I've only watched a couple, so I think I've watched The Artist and a little bit of, I think it was Metropolis and the Joan of Arc. I don't know the Joan of Arc film, what it's called, but the silent film.
Yeah, the Passion of Joan of Arc.
Yeah, so not that many. I mean, maybe there have been some others, but none that I remember.
Yeah.
Is the Seventh? No, the Seventh Seal is not a silent film, is it?
No, I don't think so.
No, no, just older. Oh, black and white. Never mind, it's black and white.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
So how was it watching this film?
Um, I'd say it was good, but I found it actually harder to access than I expected. Like I didn't. Um, I mean, not the storyline so much as some of the humor. And I don't know. I don't think that's like a silent film thing, but some of the humor felt a little. Like I've seen so many caricatures of Charlie Chaplin like humor, and it felt a little bit. I don't know. It felt a little dated, the humor, a little too slapstick for me. Although I could see it was like funny, but it just didn't make me laugh quite as much as I don't know. As it seems like it's obvious he's the genius and so well loved, and so but I didn't find myself responding as much to the humor. I found it funny and laughed, but not as much as like there were moments I could tell like this is hilarious right now, or it's like supposed to be hilarious, but I'm not finding it hilarious. I'm finding it funny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I've actually watched quite a few, and I found that the more I've watched, the more I kind of get it. I've gotten into them, and yeah, it is kind of weird though. You kind of have to almost put your mindset in like a slightly different. Like it's not like a sitcom. Like you have to kind of put yourself in a place to be like, I don't
Yeah.
know, to laugh at the joke. I don't know. It is. It's yeah. It's different.
And I don't know what it is because if it's just like seeing too much caricature, like he's it's too much. It can't just be that it's too much of a caricature, but like the feeding machine, where he's like being tested, like I can tell like that's a very clever moment, and like that this is going to be like a really funny moment, but it's kind of like, and I also knew exactly that it was just going to go horribly wrong, and he was just going to get force fed, and so it felt a little too like predictable or something. I don't know. Like I knew what was coming, and but I know it with humor, even if you know what's coming, can be hilarious. But
Yeah.
it felt too like I maybe too derivative, which maybe that's where the problem is. Is I now think of Charlie Chaplin as too derivative instead of as being very maybe innovative or like at least original in some of his stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting going back with things like books or movies or music when you're familiar with the things that it spawned. Then when you go back to the original, you're almost like, well, this just seems like this, like all this other stuff I know, but it's like you have to be like, no, wait, this guy started it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Go ahead.
so he is given a lot of credit, right, as pioneering that sort of movies, or where there were lots of other movies like that. Because I know there are some other actors in some silent films who did some sort of like slapstick comedy, but
Yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean he's definitely one of like the great comedians. He obviously wasn't the first. I think he started in 1914 for the Keystone Company, who had done a lot of other like comedic shorts and stuff. Um, but kind of like the three huge ones out of this era are Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and Harold Lloyd. Um,
oh, I've seen a little bit of Buster Keaton. I don't know if I saw a whole film, but
Yeah, so Buster Keaton is very much like a physical slapstick comedy. Harold Lloyd is much more kind of like situational, kind of gets himself into like crazy, but like it's like a different kind of like more situational humor. And then Charlie Chaplin's like a little bit of both. He's does physical stunts, but it's also very much the characters he portrays and kind of the actions they take and what situations he gets himself into. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I felt all along, actually, aside from the humor, that I was kind of having the wrong emotional responses at different times. Like, it felt really sad as a movie. I was like, this is really sad. I feel really bad for the wealth that I have. You know, I feel like incredibly like spoiled and like I don't know. Yeah, so it was interesting. I felt really sad. I didn't want all these terrible things going on, and it was, and maybe you're supposed to feel that way to the characters, but I was like, no, this is depressing. Watching all these bad things happen in their house, falling apart. I'm like, let them at least have that nice little house that they can love, and I don't know.
Yeah. 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 There's a couple ways we could go, but I think, yeah, let's talk about kind of the storyline and how you felt. Like, did you feel like you could relate to the characters? Did you feel a little too removed, like they are living a life that you've just never experienced? Yeah. Or overall, just like, do you have any thoughts on kind of the storyline and what he covers in this film?
Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, the storyline. So I think it makes me feel very aware of how removed I am from their lifestyle. Maybe more so than the Miyazaki films I've seen, where I feel like, and maybe it's just because, yeah, I could just feel like very removed from the lifestyle, and the storyline feels a little different to films that I'll watch like nowadays. So even the ending, the kind of walking off to the sunset ending, is kind of only pseudo happy, right? They're like, kind of buck up. We can do this. Let's keep going. And I suppose if I was in a lot of like poverty myself, that might be in some ways a sort of encouraging ending of like, yep, the characters decide to fit in the midst of this sort of like overwhelming disasters. They keep going.
Yeah.
And in that way, yeah, I feel like just really whiny by comparison at the end, and I feel really sorry for them because I feel like the world is kind of like constructed so that it will be bad, like it's not going to work out, even when you think you're going to get this sort of like nice little shack. And I could see again how that could be funny because you could if you were identifying with that experience of like, oh yes, there is always that one thing kind of going wrong, or the roof falling in. And although I've experienced that to some extent, it doesn't feel like the same sort of, I don't know, it feels like my concerns of like what there's always one thing means are completely different, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I have to get the car oil changed and like the tire, got punctured, or what, it feels like different concerns and much like, wealthier concerns.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's very much like a Great Depression film. It's kind of like made and set in the Great Depression, and I think it's interesting. I think it's playing with some interesting themes of just like trying to survive when work is hard to come by, but then even just the work that's available. Like us talking, like even last month talking with Princess Mononoke about kind of industrialism versus nature, and the like call of progress, and like you see, especially that first scene of the movie, you feel that very much of progress is the most important thing, even if it's like I read someone say an interesting thing about the feeding machine of like, they don't stop to like get him out of there. They just keep working on it because it's more important that they like fix this machine than to help the person. And it's just this focus on the machine and the progress and the innovation over humanity and the humans involved. And he's driven to like a nervous breakdown. And I don't know. It's just very. But with so like working there is like turning him into a machine. Like he can't stop like. Twisting his arms. It's turning into a machine, but he can't survive without working in. Like he can't without working there. He has no job. He doesn't have a home. He's better off in jail apparently because he keeps trying to go back there.
So sad.
And then when he does get back to work, he gets the guy stuck in the machine. Like. By the way,
that also was another moment where I was like, I know I'm supposed to be laughing right now, but I'm actually kind of horrified that his neck is going to get like snapped in this machine, Like it's so terrifying, and I don't know what it is. Like if we're more educated visually on like how physics should work on the stage, but I'm like, there's no way his body's going that way, and he's not like getting chopped up by that machine, like or like getting broken. You know, I keep expecting. They're like, oh, feed me my lunch, and it's a sort of hilarious moment where he's feeding him the lunch, and I'm like, I feel like his neck is gonna get, his head's gonna get chopped off. I can't like, too uncomfortable to laugh at this.
But that was an interesting scene too, because like the lunch bell goes off and the machine just turns off. Like their life is completely dictated by this schedule and this assembly line. Like he can't even help the guy out until lunch is over.
Yeah. No. No, there just seemed to be a lot of emphasis on kind of making fun of making choices for progress or for just efficiency or money's sake when it makes no sense at all, right? Like, yeah, like the feeding machine is the perfect example of it's obviously just dumb, but it's putting managers and people like that. It's just they're so dumb. They just want money, right? They just want to, you know, you can get your workers going faster and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It seemed very much like for the poor and not for like the managers or the people in charge. Like the people in charge and the are not, even the police are not properly understanding. Although they're a little okay at one point, but they're kind of not understanding all that's going on, and the people in charge are, yeah, they're just wanting money, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like Chaplin's Little Tramp character, this is the last movie that character is in. He's supposed to represent the kind of common everyday man, and kind of their plight in society and their relation, you know, and so yeah, I mean it's interesting too because this movie was kind of like the last silent film. It was made like almost 10 years after the first like sound movie came out. So pretty much everyone in Hollywood was making talking movies, and this one was still a silent movie because Chaplin didn't want that to change the character to be a talking character. He also thought he could do a lot more with silent film, that this sound process would kind of restrict him, which at the time it would. You'd have to have all this extra equipment and shooting. You couldn't go on location as easily and all these things. But what's interesting is it's somewhat of a hybrid. Like you still have sound effects occasionally, and you do have some voices. So there's still like it's using sound where possible, but it seems to be with the intent of using it only when it makes the film better. But it's still, I don't know. It's an interesting hybrid. I didn't realize that going into it, but
yeah, neither did I. When we saw the screen, suddenly the voice talking through the screen, you know, to the workers, and yeah, it was something like, oh, so there are voices sometimes.
Yeah.
And even in that, though, I can't decide whether I like it or not. As you're reminding me of some of the scenes, they're funnier in my memory. I'm realizing, yeah, that was actually kind of hilarious.
Like when he's in the bathroom and the guy starts talking to him.
Oh, yeah.
Get back to work.
Yeah. Well, and I'm also thinking of him, like, twitching, and it's so tragic. Like, that's I think what I can't get around is, like, I actually felt really sad for that kind of labor. Like, and, like, that was really sad. But yeah, the other thing that you reminded me of is it felt like it wasn't really like subtle digs against like modernization. Well, even in the title, right? It's setting you up for like this is going to be a comedy about modern times, and when it's like okay, so the screen is speaking, but no one else is. Like we hear each other through the technology and things like that. I don't know. I can't decide yet whether it feels a little too unsubtle of like a jab at the technology and progress.
Oh yeah, and I don't know that he's trying to be too subtle, and I wonder if they're like if he was trying to say like the workers don't have a voice, you know, like he's kind of it's like kind of meta within a world where all the movies are talking. This movie, the only character that does is the person in charge, and all these other people are just part of the machine. They don't have a voice. They can't say anything, and if they take a break, they get yelled at inside the bathroom. You know, like it's yeah. I think it's helping you, and the only sounds you really hear are the machines going off and all the, like, it's very much, yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know that. I think you're right. It is tragic if you like want to laugh, but you're also like feel terrible for this person. Um,
Yeah.
but I wonder if it's just he's using comedy to kind of give hope, or I don't know, at least like I think sometimes you can get your message across better through comedy than you can through just like if this was a story about a factory worker. I mean, you kind of have similar things in Metropolis and some other movies, but or what was that book about the life in the? There's all those books that were coming out around this time about life in the factories and stuff, and how terrible it was. And those obviously weren't comedies, and they're obviously still powerful, but there's like another power in making you laugh about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to imagine if I'd still feel depressed if it was like about a person who had like massive, $500,000 in student debt, and he was like trying to get a job at Starbucks, and then he gets kicked out of that or something like that, and he's
he can't stop making drinks.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that was actually a thing that stood out to me. How it's interesting because even though he's so poor, or maybe or maybe with the poverty, he's so very free to do as he chooses and to try to pursue whatever life he wants to. So he can go walking off into the sunset to the next city, or he can go apply to a job anywhere as long as he can feed himself. Like his primary concern is feeding himself.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was like this film. You never got like there never seemed to be a loss of optimism, like or hope. Like maybe occasionally here and there, but especially when like once the girl was there, like once he had his companion, she especially like she brought him even more hope. But you never got the sense like of like pure desperation. They always seem to have some other plan or option. They are poor and they're limited in that way, but it doesn't seem to like they seem just as happy in that rundown house as they do in their dream of their perfect home, like, which I think for me it was like, wow, I think I need to kind of learn from these characters on how to be, content and happy no matter my circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I mean, maybe prompted by this film, I've been thinking about that recently, of how, just the idea that we so easily buy. I mean, it's a cliche, right? We so easily buy into that wealth is going to make us happier, and maybe our equivalent would be, or at least my equivalent might be, feeling sorry that I have these student these student loans I have to pay off, which actually is even interesting. That in that way, I weirdly have way more wealth and less at the same time. Like I owe money instead of I have less than $0 to my name on the one hand, but on the other hand, I experience incredible wealth like this laptop, to Skype conversation or Google Chat. But yeah, I think it is a good example of that, of revealing that wealth is not how you determine happiness.
Yeah.
It's interesting with the modernization. I didn't see a strong contrast to like a rural life. I can't say that word. To like a farming lifestyle or the forest. There wasn't. It didn't seem like in that way. His concerns are quite the same as Miyazaki's that we have. Just even by having cities, we're kind of doing something wrong. Or I don't know if we're doing something wrong with cities, but for Miyazaki, but you almost get that feeling that even just by building up civilization, we've lost something.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that. I almost wonder if he's not offering something of contrast, because I get the sense that like there's no alternative. Like we are now in this time and this is what it is, and we're stuck here and have to figure out how to live in this new society. Like
yeah.
But I mean, it's a good point. Like there is no contrast. I think the only contrast you really get is that end scene. They're walking, and they're walking. It looks like, in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't look like they're headed into a city or so. Like. But in some ways, I wonder if that's because like they can't function in this new place. I don't know. Like they can't survive, so they leave it. I don't know. Like there's no place for them in these modern times. I don't. But regardless, yeah, you're right. There's no contrast. But
and the happiest picture you brought up already, the dream, where it's just very domestic. Like that seems to be the ideal that's set up of like, oh, I can have my own little home, or at least that's what it seems like he wants, right? A home, a home for her and for them.
Yeah.
It's so sad. Just him diving in. I mean, even that, I guess. I don't know if I've seen too many like violent films or something, but like when he's jumping in head first and the water's really shallow, I don't just think ouch. I think, oh, no, like that would break your neck maybe. Like he's just like, oh, hurt my head.
Yeah.
And actually, another sad thing with that is even once he's got the house, it's, oh yeah, I've got work. I'm so excited to get work. To go back to the same factory that kind of drove him out in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like there's no escape from the machine. Like you either work in it or you're in prison. I don't know. Like that's the only two ways to survive apparently.
Yeah, and it seems very empathetic in that way to people who got into prison, like to criminals who are saying, "Oh, we're not criminals, we're just hungry." I think that they come. I forget what the hell they say exactly, and yeah, you just see the absurdity of, well, when you're that poor. It's not even out of ill will. Like you have to eat, and you're not evil.
And when he's in prison, he had a roof over his head and food.
Yeah. It's really hilarious when he's taking the cigar and giving the cigar to the kid. He takes the cigar and gives the cigar to the kid.
Oh yeah. I also like that that they have the whole like nose powder, and then he becomes like Superman. I don't know. It's just interesting.
Nose powder?
Yeah,
the drugs, yeah. Yeah, he's punching those guys. Yeah, that's funny.
Dodging bullets.
Oh, not even just punching, but like using a door, smacking. Yeah.
And then it's unfortunate. Like he first escapes, then goes back because he doesn't have anywhere to go. He saves the guards, and in doing so, gets himself kicked out of the place he wants to stay.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the comedy with that character is the fact that it is so tragic, and no matter what he tries, no matter how hard he tries, it like never works out. He gets a job as a night watchman, and he's just trying to enjoy himself. I don't know. Like obviously he's not making good decisions, but like he loses it. He's a waiter and is terrible. Like.
I know, and I thought, oh wow, he can sing. Finally, they're gonna let him just like he can sing. I mean, he can do the singing. He works out. Even though he lost his cuff thing, like it finally worked out. And then the policeman, I'm like, no, just let them be happy. Let them try to live their lives. I think that's for me where it was a little bit. I don't know where it felt like it felt like it's just made to go wrong. Like it can't. It felt like it just fundamentally can't go right for them, which was troubling for me, I think, or it felt a little hopeless, even though they felt hope throughout it, or like they didn't despair. I think for me it felt like maybe they have no reason to have hope because they can't hold on to any of these good things.
Yeah. It seems like the system is inherently keeping them. It's hard to fault the system, right? Like it seems like in general the police are keeping people from stealing. It's not. They're not necessarily portraying the police or anything as if they are doing something bad. It's just like kind of exposing the plight of people who are in situations in which it seems like no matter how hard they try, they can't lift themselves out of it.
Yeah, and in that way, it seems like you said, he's not necessarily giving an alternative view. He's just saying this is the sort of times we live in, and in that way, making fun of like the absurdity of it all. Like we're just in absurd. We've got ourselves into an absurd place where, I mean, the manager dude is bad, but a lot of the people, like you said, are not bad, but they're doing things like taking him off the street for being a communist leader when he's just, or I think that's what they were, yeah. And when he's just waving a flag because he wants to give it back to the people who lost it. And it feels like just laughing at the absurdity of it, which, I don't know. I feel like is, on the one hand, it's, it can make you feel happy or hopeful, but it feels like it's also a little, like a despairing view, or like a, not despairing view, but like I don't know what the right word is. Cynical view of things? Not cynical. Like, since he's not giving a real alternative, I think making light of it is pretty good when you're trying to like bear the suffering. But I don't know if he actually gives reason for, if the world is that way, reason for us to be actually happy with the way things are at all, or the way we're alive today.
Yeah, like there is no alternative. So basically, your two options is to like, if it's stuck how it is, your option is to look at it as like hopeless and terrible, or you can kind of like, point out the absurdity. Just be like, wow, look at how much we've made society in a way that it's just like, this is just ridiculous that like this actually could happen. And then I guess like you point out the absurdity and then just remain optimistic and hope. You just gotta be like hopeful and keep pressing on. Like, I guess those are your two options.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Sorry, I just thought I remembered something, but nope, we're good. Yeah. So hopeful. You just have to decide to be hopeful, but without much reason.
Yeah. It's interesting too. Like the one of the opening shots is like this flock of sheep coming through, and like you get this sense of like right before we go into the work here, and then there's one. If you look, there's one.
Like, okay, settle much. You're gonna go ahead.
What?
Like it was very obvious from the very beginning. He was not gonna try to be subtle.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And then here are the workers.
Yeah, but there's the sheep, and you see if you look in the middle, there's like one black sheep, and you get like, that's his character. Like he doesn't fit in.
Yeah.
And then you cut to like the workers walking in. Like it's really obvious what he's saying, but like I wonder if part of what he's saying is, here's the society. It's not great, but it seems like most people are able to survive. Like they're able to have these jobs and survive and find a way to work, and it could have. But like what I think part of what the film's asking is like, what happens to the people who don't fit in the society? Where do they go, and what happens to them?
Yeah.
And you have two characters in this movie who don't fit and keep getting kind of like thrown out again and again, despite their best efforts.
Yeah. That's very, very sad.
Yeah.
I think him not fitting in with oh man, there's so many sad things. They all come to mind, but some of the times. Yeah, I don't know. I also remember him getting the other job at the shipbuilder's place where he takes out the. What I was saying was part of the way, like, for him to fit in would in some ways mean becoming more like a machine or something like that, and losing some of the other aspects that are himself. So like, what's getting in the way of him working at the first place? Well, he's like sneezing, or he's like pausing for a break or something like that. Those are the problems he has. Clocking in and out for the bathroom was so sad as well. Just made me like, I was like, I can't. This is just too painful to think of people experiencing this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting too, right? Because like, there's like, if he even like pauses to kind of like scratch his head, he's like behind and has to like catch up, and then it fix it. Like basically, unless like the expectation is that he is a machine, and there's like no forgiveness for having to rest, or like any error, any slow, like he can't slow down, like he's being treated as a machine. And when like, I mean, like, who can actually live up to that? And obviously it's causing him to go a little crazy. I mean, he's like trying to tighten buttons on a woman's skirt and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's not being very subtle at all.
And actually, yeah, it seems interesting that his two characters that really don't fit in are really good. Like they're both very kind and loving and just want good things and optimistic. And he'll stop the jailbreak and he just wants to buy a house for her, and he's not thinking about, well, yeah, he's so excited to go out to work so that he can get some money for her and for them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Like I was saying earlier, like the police aren't necessarily bad for arresting him for the things they do, but they're also not bad people. They're just trying to survive, and yeah, it causes them. They need food, so they do stuff that they probably shouldn't. But they're also like some of the nicest and best people in the movie.
Yeah.
You're rooting for them the whole time, but you just know that it's never going to work out.
Yeah. And I wonder what would make this. I'm trying to think of what makes this film like not offensive. Because if we were making one about like, I don't know, labor camps today, and it was a comedy film about someone who's like, and it was the same sort of like comedy film, I feel like it'd be pretty offensive. And I wonder, is that just because we're making it about ourselves? Like it's an American film about American labor, and it's not. You think that's it? Okay, yeah. It's like I'd be kind of shocking.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's what makes me feel sad, is because it brings to mind, the ways in which I have so much wealth that I'm not like grateful for, or that I just kind of take for granted. But then it also brings to mind the real suffering around the world of people who experience sort of unending work and poverty as their life.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a difference between like I don't know how you would draw the line, but there's like some difference between something that's truly tragic and something that's just absurd. Like we do have like The Office and Office Space that are like poking fun at like the nature of living in an era of cubicles and doing ridiculous jobs and just monotony, and we can poke fun at that. But you're right, like to go into people who are probably experiencing similar work conditions as the characters in this movie. Yeah. Maybe this needs to be a widespread experience that the common person of America can understand, or the common person of the world can like relate to.
In that way, I like what you said about The Office, because it feels very much like that's an office space. Like we're kind of dealing with this idea. Yeah, actually, I've been thinking about this with the How I Met Your Mother, of like this sort of meaninglessness. I mean, even though that's actually a bit more positive, or supposedly more positive on life, it's still like a pretty despairing sort of situation where it's like a very meaningless life that's being lived. The meaning in Office and maybe How I Met Your Mother is found, it seems like, in the sort of like friendships you're developing. But it seems like we're wrestling a little bit with, yeah, we kind of do our thing, and it's not really extreme poverty, but and we're not like being made into robots, but being made into sort of mindless, like semi-hedonistic. Like we're just kind of we're not even like committed to our hedonism. We're just like, okay, we're kind of, that's kind of how we want to live our lives, and we're not quite sure what to do with the sort of lack of meaning in our lives and our jobs and in our like day-to-day work, or day-to-day the way we hang out with friends and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting, like to think about. I mean, it seems that there's some of what this film is covering is still applicable to today, but it's also interesting to think about, the modern equivalent.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I'm wondering if that's partly why, for me, it was more disturbing, is because or I'm seeing other movies wrestle with the fact that, at least in my view, that we don't have enough meaning in the things that we do. Maybe because we have so much wealth and things like that, we're like we're losing the meaning. Whereas maybe it's not as much a concern for Charlie Chaplin and his viewers of like I'm wanting to say, but where is the meaning? Because I'm not seeing as much of a meaningful life being lived, and maybe maybe there's some different cultural concerns there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, if they're just doing their best to survive, maybe finding meaning in work. It seems like they'll take any job as long they just need work.
Well, I mean, I think he has meaning, but it just maybe there's more sort of like it's more of a given that of course life has meaning, like living life is intrinsically meaningful. Whereas I feel like some of the shows today, there's a bit more like concern of like I have all the things I've strived after. I have the house and I have everything, and I'm not sure where the meaning is.
Yeah. Oh, so you're saying like in this film, it seems like as long as they are able to make do, like it's inherently given that their life has some sort of meaning and it's worth pressing on. That's why they have. Yeah, that's why they have.
I feel a little bit like, why would you even want to live? In some ways, right? I'm like, why? Jail's even better, and maybe that's kind of imposing my questions, which are not as much, a little bit out of the time frame to say like, why would you even want to live at that point? Or not, why would you even want to live, but how could you be happy living with just that sort of terrible house or that terrible factory job? It almost seems worse than death. That sort of like living, just being a robot.
Yeah. But yeah, that question is never asked of like they never their optimism and hope keeps them from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually like also what you said about him becoming like a machine, like he can't stop, and he's just doing it. I didn't kind of connect that as like he's becoming more machine-like.
Yeah, yeah. Then he gets taken away to like an insane asylum, and they tell. Well, I'm just remembering now when he leaves. The doctor just tells him like avoid excitement. Like it's like but like he obviously leaves and he's not set up or even capable of avoiding any sort of like stress. Like the life he's in, like there's no like what the doctors and like there's no help for him. Like they're saying like, well, you could be cured, but you need to like be able to have the freedom to live a life where you're not having all these stresses. And there's no, I mean, he walks out. I think right after that is when he picks up the flag and gets taken to jail. Like,
yeah, there's very little freedom.
Yeah,
because there's no concern of which job would I like better. It's can I get a job? Which again, maybe, there's been a bit more of that to relate to in common in recent years with like having such a hard time in the economy of so many of our peers and so many of us having a hard time actually finding a job rather than the one we want. But
yeah,
it really seems like, oh yeah, I can get work, not oh no, I'm working at that terrible place which I should hate and is making me unhuman. Is making me more like a machine.
Yeah, but they're yeah, it seems like in this one, I think you brought this up already, but in this film, it's more the fulfillment isn't necessarily found. Like it's not like I'm trying to find the best job to fulfill me. It's I'm trying to find a job to support myself so I can lead a fulfilling life. Like there's the fulfillment is seen not coming through work. It's the work is a means to achieve fulfillment elsewhere versus, the work itself being fulfilling.
Yeah.
Which I know I find myself more concerned about. Like I'm like, oh, I need to make sure my job is fulfilling and all these things and.
Yeah. Me too. I think that's kind of what comes to mind is that he's happy just to have work, not work that he's like is his dream job, and also he doesn't seem to. I can't decide whether he finds fulfillment in his like relationships because he doesn't strike you as lonely beforehand. Like I feel like yes, he really is driven to buy the house, and you feel really happy with them together. But he seems pretty happy when his kind of needs are taken care of. So like in the prison, he doesn't strike you as, even though that could be cast as like a very lonely thing, he seems pretty happy because he's got a nice cell.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even the meaning or like fulfillment doesn't seem to come in the people you're around or the.
Yeah.
So almost just being alive is enough. Yeah, I don't know.
And then yeah, well, like he doesn't necessarily change when she's with him, but it's almost like he's found someone who approaches the world the same way he does. Like in some ways there is some romantic nature to their relationship, but there's also almost just a sort of like companion friendship.
Yeah.
Like it's not all about like, oh, this is this like woman I'm in love with. It's just like, oh, I found like a fellow traveler like shares a similar soul that we can like journey through life together.
Yeah.
This person understands me. I don't know, which I thought was interesting because yeah, it was a woman, but it also like I feel like in many ways the character could have just as easily been not exactly not a one-to-one, like not for everything, but in some parts of their relationship it could have just easily been a guy.
Yeah. I think the way in which the girl that was interesting was that they could make a little like mini picture of what life is supposed to look like with the home, even though there's not any of the romance or anything like that. But they can have that, like they can like play house and like fit in that way, like, yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to be. Yeah.
And it was just yeah they I mean that little dream of like what life could be like for them was really funny.
Yeah.
Like the cow, like come on in, stop. I don't know. It's just like
Yeah.
totally ridiculous and idealistic, but you almost get the sense that like while it doesn't look exactly like that, when they have that little shack together, to them it's like almost the same. Like they're almost living that life.
Well, and again, it's like in the ideal house, they're eating a nice good meal, and getting fresh milk from a cow. It's not any many of the other things we would maybe use of like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a fairly small house. They just have like some nicer food and a nicer house, but
Yeah. Yeah.
and you get the sense that like they're like purely content. They're not like wanting more. And obviously when they're in the shack they do want like something that's not falling apart. But you also get the sense that like
I
I
think
don't
that's
know, to them they're making it like it's enough.
yeah, and I think that again was so sad for me when they seem to be content with so little, and it seems like the world's not content with giving them the little that they'd be willing to take.
Yeah, like they can't even keep what they have.
Yeah. Yeah. So sad. Although some of it, like you said, is poor choices, not just clumsiness. It's like,
Yeah.
no, don't bring the girl in tonight. I know that sounds like a great idea, but you know.
Well, and then like just let, and then you get the burglars are there and they're like trying to befriend you and
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seems like again he's almost just like overruled by like kindness, because of course you'd want to let her have a meal that night, and so it's very immediate, right? It's like, yeah.
yeah. Well, and then the guys come in and obviously they have guns and stuff, but he also like they're just like hungry and want some food and like he's not going to like deny them their like I mean he's a terrible watchman, but he's also you're right like he's just trying to be kind and make sure people are cared for and
Yeah, and that way he wasn't. It was kind of hilarious him using that note again that he's like a trustworthy person after he's like failed attempts. He's like, oh yeah, look, here's my.
after he's like knocked a boat into the ocean.
Yeah. I'm like a different time. If only we could move on from mistakes like that.
I've got a letter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. That scene with the boat was just so funny because obviously he like ruined the boat, and then I just love how like he doesn't try and uh like uh prove like or like justify his actions. He just like sees it go, grabs his jacket, and walks off.
Yeah. Actually, there's another moment with the comedy that I mean, it's funny in hindsight. And I wonder if watching again if I'd find it funnier. But at that time, it felt a little like, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen here. Like when I saw like go look for a wedge, it's like okay, like you could almost tell from the point when you saw the boat was wedged up, by a wedge that they were gonna somehow he's gonna knock that over. But it was like, oh, look for a wedge. He's going to go for that wedge, and it's gonna cause some disaster. And I don't know if I'm living so much further downstream from this movie that for whatever reason, when those sort of things happened, it felt like too predictable or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely not a. It's not relying on surprise for its comedy. Like you know what's going to happen, and then I mean, I think part of it's just he performs what you know is going to happen in a funny way.
Yeah.
And I think it relies on what you brought up a lot of like the presenting situations that are absurd, and you just see this character that you love going through these situations, and it's absurd, so it's like inherently somewhat funny, but he's not trying to like do something to surprise you and kind of catch you off guard. It's very much
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and maybe if I could have got more into the mood of it, that I would have found that funny. Like if I could have accepted that, because I think I kind of saw I would have to do that a little bit. But maybe if I could have done, yeah, or maybe in the future I'd be able to do a better job of getting into that, of just like sitting back and being able to say, okay, I'm going to see the gags coming, but like, yeah. Look, I feel blindfolded. It's like, okay. But like to see it and just enjoy the absurdity of it, even though you know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You're just going to watch him play it out.
Yeah, I mean, like you never once feel that he might actually fall over the edge when he's like skating blindfolded. But there is still something like kind of funny about seeing him get close each time.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. That's even like he's kind of clueless to his surroundings, and that's most of the reason he gets into the situations he's in. Like the reason he got arrested as a communist leader is because he was completely clueless to what was going on around him, and I don't know. I feel like that's a lot of what happens to him is just because he's not aware, but it doesn't change how he lives. Like he just skates like there isn't a ledge, and I feel like that's how he goes. Like he, in some ways, he kind of goes through life blindfolded.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a cautionary tale.
Well, after watching this, are you more inclined to watch another silent movie, or do you think it's going to be, I don't know, I'm just like, is it more like still like vegetables?
A vegetable. Oh, no, I think I'm still happy to watch this movie. I think the disappointment with Charlie Chaplin for me was I knew he's such a great, and I knew my perception of him was probably wrong, and that he was probably funnier than I was expecting him to be. So what I thought was, okay, for me, it doesn't look like his movies would be funny. It looks like they'd be kind of just silly and I don't know, too cliche or whatever. And it felt a little bit more like, oh, I kind of have an accurate sort of picture of the kind of humor that was going to, or it was going to just be this sort of slapstick thing going on. And so I think that was some of the disappointment, was realizing I was trying to set aside my expectations to say, oh, he's such a great that he's just going to be hilarious, or that I'll still find him hilarious today.
Well, and to be fair, I don't know that this is like regarded as his funniest movie. So maybe there's some, and I do know that like this movie he kind of reused like in many ways, since he kind of knew it was going to be his last silent movie, I know that there's like multiple scenes that were kind of homages to previous movies he'd done, like kind of revisiting. So, um, in some ways, I'd be curious to watch some of his more previous ones and see, if
Yeah.
he felt the same way or yeah.
Yeah, and I think as we've talked about it, it's helped me appreciate it more and just see. Like, I think it's just that you're experiencing a different kind of humor than I'm used to watching. So I think watching it without being expected to be surprised or expected. I mean, I think Wes Anderson, after watching some Wes Anderson films, I was able to enjoy them more when I realized that I shouldn't expect some of the plot expectations I had for him. I should like sit back a little bit and just enjoy the humor, enjoy the absurd characters and how they interact with each other. And I wonder if I could approach Charlie Chaplin that way, because I really like Wes Anderson, but I think I really see that. Oh yeah, it's the way the plot is going. I have to do like a different thing when I'm watching it to enjoy the humor of it,
Yeah.
and not. And with this, like I'm like looking for resolutions in the plot or for surprises or things like that. And to just expect, oh, they're just gonna keep getting into these troubles, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah, I'll send out whatever we're watching next soon, and then hopefully more people will come. And at some point, I think I will do another silent film, and we'll.
I'd be happy to watch another silent film. I thought, isn't Metropolis next on the list?
I've toyed with it. We can either do that. Yeah, I mean, if you're up for it, it's a little longer, and it's definitely like not a comedy, but actually it does kind of cover some similar issues. It's dealing with kind of the progress of civilization and.
Yeah, I really don't mind it. In that way, I didn't feel that much of a negative as a silent film. It felt more like I missed the comedy, missed me a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. All right.